Well, friends, it's David Vos from Radio Free America down here in Bunkers. Well, it's a beautiful day in Alabama, and I hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. I am about with glee and such happiness. I am filled with joy to come to this place in our discussion, our series of discussions about who are they? Who's running the world? Why are they running our lives into the ditch? And when did it all happen? And how did it happen? Well, you see that man there on your screen? That might be someone you might not even recognize, because you see these pictures that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is not the name of the church that, we follow, nor was it Joseph Smith's church. This is stuff that they've done since Joseph Smith was murdered by Brigham Young, which we will show in this video. So, you see, we've gone through, so this picture is supposed to be, and I don't know whether I can believe that either, that's supposed to be an actual picture of Joseph Smith the prophet. It does resemble very closely some of the pictures that they put out there, which I don't mind at all, because they show him in a good light, and I believe he was a very handsome man. But what I like about him is he looks very wise and determined. And I know from personal testimony that this man was good to his bones, and that he made the right choice, which might not even seem like such a big deal. Oh, well, he made the right choice. Lots of martyrs, Dave. No, Gandhi and these kinds of folks are few and far between. And what Joseph Smith did, because he had access right to this is the picture that they usually kind of show you in the books and stuff, and it really does resemble him quite well. But so I like this picture. I like this picture of this man. We've been talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, we said that. Did I say Jehovah's Witness? Because you see, I was raised Jehovah's Witness, so I have a personal place in my heart, for helping people to understand, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but Mormons. I know a lot about the Mormon Church and things that the Lord has revealed to me that I think you're going to want to know, especially if you are an ex-Mormon or a Mormon or anyone who's interested in the truth. But this is going to be, I believe, one of the very first times that people are going to be able to hear the truth, the real story of Joseph Smith, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today is apostate, and we will prove that. I mean, lots of people tried to prove that in the past, but there are more informations coming out. But it is in line with everything that the actual information that I'm seeing and reading now is really and completely in line with everything the Holy Spirit had been giving me and telling me, and my witness of Joseph Smith. There's no way, you just know. I mean, there's some people, you can't find anything on them because they're good people, and there's so many stories about the good things that Joseph Smith did and all of the torture and persecution that he went through. And when you really get into the history and find out how the church has maligned him because they wanted to go follow some demonic religion of swapping wives. And so we're going to document all of this, how Brigham Young himself started the entire polygamy thing. By his own words, he admits, Brigham Young, to having gotten this vision before Joseph Smith did. And we will prove that Joseph Smith never got the vision. In fact, Joseph Smith fought Brigham Young till he died. And this story is very important, even to non-Mormons and ex-Mormons and ex-witnesses and ex-Scientologists and stuff. Whoever you are, this is very important, because if you can understand what we're doing in the series, going back to John Dee and Francis Bacon and tracing the Masons and what happened, and people like L. Ron Hubbard on the screen. These were placed in the world particularly for some reason that Satan had to deceive the whole entire world. They were all in on it. Love people at that level, like L. Ron Hubbard. He was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, who was a disciple of Charles Taze, well, I should say Judge Rutherford. But all the pictures that you see of Joseph was a very kind and loving man with loving and kind and wise eyes. And what Joseph Smith said, whenever he said it, it was in line with the truth. And he died trying to uphold these truths. Unlike John Dee and Edward Kelly and Francis Bacon, who caved in when lured by Satan to have power and money and great riches. See, there were only a few. It sounds like, all the martyrs were faithful. Very few faithful people in the world ever. Like this man, Brigham Young, which we will prove raped children and had big harems and slept with anybody he wanted, without even any kind of spiritual wifery at all. Just running around like a stud bull. Plain and hypocrisy, disfellowshipping people at certain periods of time for doing this that he was doing, or excommunicated, and hiding and lying these situations, falsifying documents, all the stuff that we're going to talk about. But people like Gandhi, who gave their lives for mankind, offered it, and eventually basically died from those injuries, sacrificing his entire life for the cause of good and equality and liberty. And people like Madame Blavatsky, who never gave in to the spiritists and the occultists around the world. Or people like Joseph Smith, who was gathering the saints. He was going to run. They said he would have been elected president. It would have. He was very popular. Thousands of people came from all around the world, Britain and around the world, and they sent missionaries all around the world, and they came to see the great prophet in the great New Jerusalem called America. And he was a abolitionist, wanted equality and liberty, and they hated him because, you see, there was another little group of Illuminati. Remember, we started in 1776. So they were already hot on their heels, hot on destroying George Washington and these individuals, this liberty and justice for all. These men came together. Some of these, as we said, they were all Masons, including Joseph Smith. And this is why I think it's so important that we understand the facts of this story, the history of these Masons. Because today, this secret society, these Masons, run the world. Oh, buddy, in ways that you can't even imagine. We can't even explain it all in one breath here. They own and operate everything. They own your soul, basically, in this world. They tell us when to get up and when to sit down and what to eat. But in the days of Joseph Smith, there were lots of good ones. But a very large number of them had gone over to the dark side because it was taken over by John Dee opening up the pits of hell. Okay, and from that day forward, these evil individuals, they didn't know they were evil. They were seeking, they thought that they had to go through the realms of devils to get to the angels, the realms of angels, because someone said in the book of Enoch that Enoch went and looked into the pits of hell, and therefore he had revelation of hell, and therefore one who is seeking Lord has to have this revelation of hell and talk to the demons. But you see, it was just ramblings and pitiful, apostasy running through their brain, doctrines of devils, but they only believed it hook, line, and sinker because they were offered sex, they were offered power, they were offered money. And then more people, like a pack of dogs, got, and then they said, okay, we can have sex with anybody we want. Oh, goody, and get away with it. So then they just would defend it like in a pact, even though their conscience was in a crisis. They knew in the outside that if they didn't defend this one for all and all for one, they would all go down together. And they knew they were, at some point, they'd done so many bad things that they knew they were going to hell. So they sowed their oats and threw their cares into the wind. And this apostasy began to grow about the time of Francis Bacon, when they created this Rosicrucianism. They were being accused of very bad and wicked things, and many of them were doing very bad and wicked things. And this is why they were being outlawed, and the church forbid anyone from becoming a Mason. Because they were an underground, they had become infiltrated by the Illuminati in Bavaria in 1776, the Adam Weishaupt, this group that they had been running basically the church through the Jesuits. When the Goths took over the church, the Visigoths took over the Roman church in 405, and the 10 tribes, the motherland and the fatherland, and the great white brotherhood of the Germanic peoples, they were running the church and sailing their skull and bones all over the world to destroy and maim. And why? Because the occult, this little group called Kabbalah worshippers, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is an Old Testament tradition, if you understand what I mean, was not Christian. They didn't believe in Jesus as the Son of God, the only begotten of the Father, who died for your sins. It was all a big lie. Jesus was just some concept. Basically it still meant you got to worship the G, which is in the middle of the little symbol in the Masonic symbolism, with the little G in the middle, the square and the compass, that they say, they tell people that the G just means God. Some say, oh, no, it's deeper than that. It means geometry. Because we believe geometry is God. Okay, you see what the final secret is when you finally get through all of this Masonic stuff today, and they get you to the last veil being lifted in your mind, and you come down the hall of truth and find out you're just wearing a black robe and you're cloaking the truth, and you get into the inner sanctum of the devil's cove, and you say, what is the great secret? You come this far, 33rd degree. I knight you, oh stupid idiot, who followed your lust rather than your spirit. And, here was the secret. There is no God. You're a fool, and we own your soul. And if you say anything to anyone, we'll kill all your family, because you gave an oath to Satan when you joined this place. Oh, yes, you did. Well, I didn't know. Yes, you did. We told you all the way along who we worshiped and what we were doing, trying to take over the world. And you knew in your heart that what you were doing, this wasn't from God. When Mr. John D saw the devils coming up out of there, he should have ran. But he was used because of his lust to carry on and hand these things on to Francis Bacon. And they taught pedophilia, and they taught the world that you must be gay, because they were so inflamed with their lust that they wanted all their little partners. They had thrown all balance and morality away and just said, whatever we say goes. Whatever, us on the top, we get to do anything we want. We deceive the ones on the bottom. But that's the way God wants it. See, this is what it says in the Bible in the Old Testament, why we must have slaves. And go and genocide all the nations that do not worship Jehovah. So this is what they believed, and yet their conscience must have known. So they became jittery and shaky and frightened and indulgent and fat and ugly. And the only way they could even get a woman is if somehow they could rise up to a place of authority and make a decree that all the women shall have eye for them. And at least one pretty woman must, adore him, right? Or she will be stoned. I mean, this is how it works. So, when this pit of hell was opened, it was because Satan was deceiving mankind. The apostasy really did come. Both, yes, from Satan, but it could never have been opened, this door, this bottomless pit, if mankind himself had not received it. Jesus had already paid the price, done everything for our eternal life and happiness. But Jesus said, I'm going to go away. I'm going to give these talents to certain people. Some are going to do well with them. Others are going to do very evil with them. And then he says, but if that evil slave shall say in his heart, my master delayeth his coming, and begin to beat his fellow servants, woe for that servant. For the master shall come in a day in which he knoweth not, and assign his portion in the lake of fire. And this is what has happened. They are the evil servant. Jehovah's Witnesses are claiming to be the faithful and wise servant that Jesus was saying to feed his sheep. What? Feed them propaganda? No. It says you are an evil slave because you begin to eat and drink with the drunkards and the gluttons, which is the old covenant. You go back to the law, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In your hypocrisy, how you shall escape the fires and the wrath of this God Jehovah, which is coming, is beyond any sane or rational person. So, before then, Francis Bacon opened up, or I should say John Dee and Edward Kelly opened up the pits of hell and brought up this demonic purpose that then was spread throughout the brotherhoods who were believing they were preserving these ancient truths. They were good people. All the Masons, some people say, was the Masons good or bad? The Masons are good. Not the people anymore. Not the it's like saying, is the world today good or bad? Well, the people are the children of the Lord. We're all the children of the Lord. But we have become corrupt. Our minds are false now. And we're all deluded. And there's very few among us that know anything, that are awake. And who is running our little world? Well, us, and we're all fallen. Yeah, I know the devil came down and offered it to us. Come on now, you can have all you like. And you can make up any verse you want in the Bible to say what you want it to say and tell the world that you are God and no one else. And can we do that? Yeah, we can. Well, I don't know if that'd be proper. Well, just do what I say. Obviously it's right because all your friends and family are doing it too. Yeah, okay, well, this is the way it is, isn't it? You've got to, eat and kill, an eye for an eye. Well, it's in the Bible, so I guess I'll do it. And that's what today all institutions have become. You see, Joseph Smith was one of the good guys. At that time, 1800, there were good guys. Not all the Masons were evil. It was a good organization. I mean, it wasn't even an organization. It was simply the original Christian teachings that had come down, but they were losing them because they were burning the libraries and murdering the ones who were wise and the elders. They had murdered the apostles, and along with it went the apostolic doctrine. And then you just had people who knew or heard about the apostle doctrine, and they kept getting deceived a little further and little further every generation, and being sucked and squeezed. And you see, the faithful could have led the world to heaven, but the unfaithful tread them down into hell because the faithful didn't speak up. They didn't teach and preach harder than the devil and his demons. So it was gradual. There were good priests, there were bad priests. And at first you couldn't tell the difference. It was motive, and who knows motive. But eventually some of the ones who had bad motives began to not really care about truth or people anymore. And they made covens and pacts and secret societies. Now, they didn't change. They hadn't got the brains to come up with, esoteric wisdom or anything like that. They're still using the same esoteric wisdom, the good stuff. But they're perverting it. It's like they're still using the Bible like us, but they're perverting the scriptures. Oh, well, I believe in the Bible. I believe in Jesus. Well, yeah, but what Jesus? Because if you're believing in any other Jesus, Paul says, it's another Jesus who Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. So they came to America, created Washington, D.C., and many of these, again, Washington and Jefferson, we assume, we don't know which of them was good in their heart and which of them were bad, Well, they may have been just people, good and bad. They didn't really know the finale of the whole thing. They were Masons because they believed in it. But they also had some brothers in the faith that were pulling them into businesses and, well, we could do a little of this and that. Come on, it won't hurt nothing. And they're like, well, let's see, I guess I could get away with it, but ooh, that would be a temptation. And what if somebody found out? And what about your heart? What about right and wrong? Well, they just only started, slowly, like take a little heroin, So yeah, at the time that they made the Constitution, was good. They wanted liberty and justice for all. They were good people. Okay, even though Francis Bacon was there egging them on, right? Some say he died earlier, but others say he didn't really die. He faked his death. Some say he was there at the signing of the Constitution, and you can see it in one of the pictures. There's a guy with a hat, and they're like, that's him. Well, maybe. I don't know. But if he was egging them on to sign it, it's because they were probably, I really don't think, I've said that it might have been him, because there's this rumor, but I don't think it was. I don't really know. I know that there was some good people like John Paine, should say Thomas Paine, and certain individuals who wrote a lot about liberty and things. There were differences of opinions in Republicans and Democrats and this kind of thing, and the Whigs and the, whatever. Different parties. And they didn't have enough sense to realize they were now so far gone. You're not supposed to be involved in parties, and government and religion. They got, not saying they were bad people. Protestants thought they were good because they weren't Catholics, right? And the Catholics thought they were good because they were faithful and they didn't depart like a Protestant. But they were all trying to be faithful. But in the end, they were being lured in by own. We don't need any cathedrals to be saved or baptisms or fonts and in the Father, in the name of the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and do this little mark like this and take away for and dunk 3 times and bam, voila, you're saved. No, that was ridiculous. We should have known what Jesus, followed Jesus' words and read them to heart. He said, no, we want institutions. We don't want a king and an emperor. That was displeasing unto the Lord. But we didn't care. We didn't listen to what Jesus said, to feed the hungry and poor. Well, they tried, we got a charity over here for all the poor people, but you've got to live in the prison down there in the dungeon. Right? After all, I can't have you in my home. You're filthy. But there are some scraps over there on the table if you'd like them. Now, we've done our duty. But if you don't want to accept Christ the way we accept Christ and everything we say and do, and wear your hair appropriately, and his long black robe, and we'll smack your fingers every time you don't do what we say with the ruler. If you won't want to do that, then to hell with you, to damn with you. We'll write a curse upon thee, an edict from the papal bull. Nobody knows why he's wearing that weird hat up there. We've forgotten all about it. We don't even know the traditions. It's just got lost. And so this institution had these amazing symbols, just like the Bible has amazing symbols, but people forgot what these symbols meant. So we got the devil that, they're ripe for the picking. So John Dee's going to ask God a question, right? But out comes the devil, this little genie out of the bottle, and he's like, okay, we're going to swap lives now. And this is a prerequisite. You must do what we say or we won't give you this great revelation. Well, John Dee wanted the revelation, not because he wanted truth, but because he wanted power. He wanted to rule. And the devil said, here's my conditions. I want you to build me this kingdom. And you're all going to be my little slave. And in other words, And so they created and they infiltrated the ancient churches. They created new churches. They sent out Russell. Russell probably thought he was doing a good thing. Charles Russell was a Freemason. I don't find anything too bad about the person, except that he died in a graveyard on Halloween night in 1916. And I don't know if he did that or if they killed him and murdered him, ritually sacrificed him. But I do find Charles Russell's demeanor a little bit nicer than Judge Rutherford, although both of them have done terrible, questionable things. And the thing about Russell is he did lie and own billions of dollars worth of stuff. Well, at the time, it would have been millions. And hid that from people. And, I'm sure that he was, he was writing letters to the Rothschilds and stuff. So anyway, I don't know about Russell, but I know that Judge Rutherford was a very, very wicked man. And I know that Brigham Young was too. And what we're going to show in this video is I want to expose the Mormons now. We've been talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, and others. But I want to really give you some information because I hear people, this is something that hurts my heart because people who don't know all this history, and how would you know? But you think because you look it up, somewhere and it says, oh, well, yeah, Joseph Smith was a filthy polygamist. And he was a Mason, and he was evil, and he was the devil, and you think, oh, well, see, Kyle, you're an idiot, Dave. You say he's a prophet. Well, what did they say about Jesus? They crucified him and condemned him. Okay, but, and false information went forth about him, and lies about he was trying to raise up an insurrection or something, and he wasn't. This is only about peace. And Pilate says, I find no fault with this man, and washed his hands. But when they asked the people, do you want me to let him go? They said, no, we want Barabbas. So they said, may his blood be upon us. This happened because this was an explanation of why Jesus had to die, because the people could not yet recognize the Christ within them. And that's why Jesus said, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. Because the Lord is patient with us. All of us. All of us little greedy little souls that live in this little world. But Jesus said, those who go into hell will not come out until they paid the last penny. So, it is a fearful thing to be willfully wicked and hurtful, and to follow after the flesh in selfishness. But people do it. So, people ask me, did Joseph Smith believe in polygamy? Well, here's the thing. We're going to show in background here, there's all this documented. But the church does not want you to know this, because here's why. Brigham Young's the one who created, him and John Taylor and Bennett and certain others. They came in. Joseph Smith didn't even know these guys. This guy named Brigham Young. He came in from some other missionary thing. And Brigham Young was already a Mason, but he was following a different rite. Remember, there's the York Rite. The York Rite is when these people came from England. The Great Mother Lodge had been in York, in Britain. This is why in Maine, where they first landed up in there, where the Pilgrims landed in that area, Massachusetts, Boston, that area, there's a little town called York. And that's why you call the whole state New York, okay? Because it came from there. What is the York? What was the Mother Lodge? It was the great place where they started this plot from Britain, from John Dee, to destroy the world. Satan entered in and come up through the bottomless pit to create this evil world. They came over here and with the pirate ships and destroyed and murdered the natives, and then they cut other ships, Columbus, and made the District of Columbus, D.C. He runs the world now, this Columbus. All with his little skull and bones and the Rosicrucians, you see. Because the Rosicrucians were created by John Dee and Francis Bacon. And they were bringing up Satan from the bottomless pit, as we saw the other day. So they came to this little area around southern Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and that little spot where they came, in New England. And this is where Kennebunkport is. You know, presidents are always going there. Well, at Kennebunkport, Saco and I think it's Portland or something there at Maine, and all the way down to this little place called York. And below that's another one, I think. Anyway, there's all these little towns. This was all these original settlers from England. York, and this is where, the New York, and this was their capital. And then they ended up making it in Philadelphia, and then finally in Washington, D.C. But they're all made on a ley line, straight down. They knew exactly what they're doing. Each of these little places represent a different place in the stars, and they move the headquarters down every so many years. And, it all has to do with the position of the stars. So, they came over here, and there was a little group of that whole area, the state of Maine and Massachusetts and that area, were all polygamists. Now, the reason why, pedophilia and all this kind of stuff, they had they had churches. They called themselves Christians, and they followed a man called Cochrane. Cochrane's brother-in-law was, I forget what his name was, but I don't know specifically whether it was his daughter or his cousin or something, but one of the bigwigs of this whole church, the Cochranites, that were polygamists, they called it spiritual wifery, and they washed your feet and did different things specific so you could know who they were. And they had basically taken over the entire area around southern Maine and up around York and Portland and so there were thousands of them. And Brigham Young came there and married this woman while he was already married to this other woman. And he joined some, if you get to digging in it, it may be that there was a Masonic sort of plot where they had various churches to try and combat Joseph Smith. Because Joseph Smith was gaining, like the good Masons who were faithful and said, what Joseph Smith wanted to do was to reform these ancient truths. He believed in Masonry. He believed in the esoteric wisdom very much. He was a full-blooded, Mason, right? But he knew of the apostasy of John Dee and this polygamy. And this is why Brigham Young was trying to bring it, keep it that way, because that was the apostasy. It was already, going through the Masons like a cankerworm. And most of them had accepted this idea that they were coming to America to establish the Old Testament, New Jerusalem. And so they had different ideas. And sometimes they would call their headquarters Rome, sometimes the Jerusalem or Alexandria. They had kind of different religious ideas. And there were different ideas amongst Masons. And a group of Masons that were following Joseph, they were like, well, we don't understand. If these truths are right, why are they so bad? Why are these people getting away with all this evil? And Joseph Smith said, we're not going to do that. We're going to reform it. Restoration of all things spoken of by the mouth of the holy prophets. He said, I want you to know that the angels are telling me that what they're doing is a distorted concept, that they are twisting it. They're looking for mundane things and sex and polygamous relations and slavery and power under the Old Testament God. So we're going to restore this truth. And Joseph Smith gave speeches about man is what God once was, and we will become as God is now, and these amazing speeches of opening up truths that mankind had never heard, explaining what maybe some of these verses in the Bible meant, and reincarnation, and better understanding of who we are, whether we're going to have a body forever, and whether, we should eat this or that, or we're free, or we're under some law. All of this was being answered in beautiful, beautiful ways. It was amazing. There were reports that Joseph Smith could heal people. There were one time where Joseph Smith raised someone from the dead who'd been dead for 4 days. He was in a grave, in a tomb, and he was stinking. He was rotten. He turned green. And it wasn't like, well, somebody said that, and it's not true. Remember, at that point, these bad Masons hated Joseph Smith. They were trying to get him on some cause. So the only way they could take Joseph Smith out was by using lust to destroy the order. That all the people would follow Joseph. They would never follow Brigham Young. So they had to kill Joseph Smith. But before they killed him as a martyr, they had to get it embedded in the priesthood amongst the followers, secretly, that we have plural wives, and make it look like after we kill Joseph Smith, then we'll change all the documents and the dates on things and retro date all these new doctrines under his name. And we'll, if there's people that are living at that time that know what's going on, they know that's not right, they won't be able to say anything because we're going to already have offered them little girls. They're sleeping with little girls and stuff. And if they get found out that they were apostate or they did something like that, no. So they're never going to tell on each other. Never. And so that's how they work. They offer people these. This is what's the modus operandi all around the world. Even today, it still goes. People still have integrity. People still try to fight for the truth and love. And new people keep coming along and keep saying this isn't right. And they're constantly fighting and fighting. So they had to get it worse and make television, put it right into our minds from the time we're born. They couldn't stamp out our desire to love one another and to have integrity. But at that time, there was enough of these men in higher up positions that while they had Joseph Smith in jail, they took over the reins of the authority in government, put certain people in place. And then they concocted lies and rumors and things and got Joseph Smith arrested. And then they came in and murdered him. The story about how he died, in truth, is not what you are always being told. Joseph Smith died so courageously because they had told him all they wanted was for him to accept these new things that they were giving the world that they wanted implemented, like polygamy, slavery, and, the right for the elders to basically rule over the little peasants and have all the children for their wives, and fleece the flock, and basically a terrorist organization, like they always do, run by religion. Okay, it's the religious spirit that gets into them. It's a devil. And they have these orgies and they do these things in the name of God. And Joseph Smith fought it to the day he died. You will see in these documents that I'm putting up on the screen the things that Brigham Young said, the things that Joseph Smith said. There is proof there. For anyone who really wants to know, just stop this and pause it and read these documents for yourself. Brigham Young was sent to this area up there around York, Kennebunkport, Maine, where all these thousands of people were polygamous. And he slept with this woman named Augustus Cobb. He had at least that one, because the only reason we know that is because once the church went from Nauvoo out to Utah, this Augustus Cobb came out and became was Brigham Young's wife at this point. And her child that she lost in pregnancy had died, but the child's name, or I guess it was an infant or a baby or something. Anyway, the name of the child was Brigham. And she was Brigham's wife, but she had the child when she was in the Cochranite area, over at the spiritual wifery area. Well, that area was was the Masons that were there running around. And this was an idea that got started. Not all the Masons accepted Cochranite religion. Some of them were Quakers and Shakers, and they got that name because of Shakespeare. There were different groups that are very powerful to this day. A lot of people think, oh, Quakers, they're not very powerful. Oh, brother, they have a lot of power in the world of this occult. They're all Masons. And Presbyterians are one of the most richest and powerful groups, religious groups, and Methodists. But these churches are very powerful. Not just Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons that are very powerful. But one of the groups at that time was the Cochranites. See, what they did was they just used, because the Mormons now, which they weren't called Mormons, they were the Church of Jesus Christ. That's what Joseph Smith said they were. But people started calling them Mormons. So Mormons today has nothing to do with the teachings that Joseph Smith gave, who said that everybody should be equal. He didn't start all these temples and rites and polygamy. All that he said in letters and affidavits he did not want. The whole reason why he was put into jail is because he refused to accept this apostate version of the esoteric wisdom. He wanted to restore the truths. And many people knew what Masonry was, what the original esoteric wisdom was, what the truth was. They understood that. But the elders' leadership, they had a pact, and people were afraid to say anything because they were involved in scandalous things, and there were laws in the books. You could go to jail for pedophilia and stuff like this. So they were afraid to say anything. And a lot of times then the wicked would gain control over certain areas. Until today they've set up shop there, like through different efforts that they've gotten Hollywood and the media and stuff like this. And this way they can feed this propaganda, this evil right into people's minds. But what I'm trying to tell you is that what happened there with Joseph Smith wasn't just some little church that you don't need to know this information. This is the history of the United States. Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and Mormons, and all these groups all stem from that little group, that little New York, the York rites of Masonry that corrupted and opened the pits of hell. But there was still one key, and I think that's what Aleister Crowley was trying to do. He was trying to open up some pit and have the beast come out. See, because they hadn't fully got out, because they were asking these demons what they had to do to get the final revelation. And the demon said, well, ultimately, they had told them they had to have swapped wives and get involved in sin and wickedness and all this crap. Because the demons love that. They feed off of it. They enter into their bodies and enjoy this orgies and things that they make them do. And they tell them some crazy stuff like they have to do it in order to get saved or whatever. And there's a lot of pleasure involved in sex. And then they get hooked on it. It's like heroin, and they get confused and moral. And then, like you said, they have to fight to defend, hide it, because the world would find out and they'd go to jail or they'd lose their families, So this is what the devil did. And Joseph Smith said, this has got to stop now. This apostasy that's running throughout this land and the world. What started with John Dee. They went and sought from the Lord, and they accepted the devil, who changed himself into an angel of light, but was really Satan, dressed in dark robes that they knew perfectly well after a while that they had made a big mistake, but they didn't have any way to restore it, because even when Joseph Smith tried to, many people came. They would have listened. They wanted the right path, but there were too many evil people like Brigham Young that would take the law, and they had power and control of armies and lawyers. And so the bad people who were trying to hide their wicked pedophilia and necromancy and talking to the dead and getting power and privilege this way, and starting these pacts and secret societies. They got stronger and stronger, turned everything upside down and hid everything, and took care over the newspapers and the propaganda and the school systems, and got into government. And the good guys kept working beside him trying to restore it until Joseph Smith came along. And he tried, and he gave his life. He made a testimony of Jesus Christ with his blood by saying, I know these mysteries, just like you know them. These presidents, your governors, they have fallen, and they are now following Satan. And Joseph Smith didn't say, okay, I'm scared. I'll get involved a little hanky-panky, and then they got something on me, and then I'll be afraid to speak, and I'll go to hell with them. No, Joseph Smith, in his integrity, stood firm. Emma Smith, read these articles and see what Emma Smith said. There's no doubt in anyone's mind after you read these documents. I know they're difficult to read, some of them. It's too small of print. But if you really want to know what happened with Joseph Smith, I suggest you read these documents that I put in this video. Emma said it never happened. Her children, one of the children was, he said he was old enough to know when his mom and dad, were in the house together, and their bedroom was next to his, and he could hear everything. And he says not once ever did his mom and his dad, Emma Smith and Joseph Smith, ever argue or have a harsh tone. Because these lies that the church, like Brigham Young, keeps saying, because Brigham Young hated her and tried to pay her off and get her to come to Utah. And she said, I'll never go. My husband said that you will lead the church to hell. And you're lying about me and my husband. He never had any other wives. DNA tests have shown there was any children born of any union other than Emma Smith. And his children said until his dad was taken to prison, there were no women in that house. But we have absolute proof, even from Brigham Young's own mouth, that he was the one who came up with the polygamy idea and spread it. It was the Masonic evil underground that spread it all the way through. The Cochranites were very powerful people. And this girl, this Augusta Cobb, was in with the Cochrane himself. She was a sister-in-law or a sister or something. So they were related. Because when Brigham Young would go there, he would stay with this Cochranite guy's brother or something. Anyway, he ended up marrying his sister or brother or something, And so they had a child named Brigham. But, as time went on, they had many other children because she ended up going to Utah with him. So the Cochranites, it's beyond proof. I mean, just read all this. Brigham Young went there and was doing missionaries. They had church conferences over there, Kennebunkport, Maine, or York, or wherever that is there over there in that little town, Saca. Right along the Maine, the southern down there by Massachusetts is where they would have these big conferences. This is where the bad apostasy got going. And Brigham Young opened the pit of hell once again, like John Dee and Edward Kelly. And in his lust for power, which, he was not one of the original apostles with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith never liked him. They falsified documents where it says that Joseph Smith appointed him as president. See, that's what the whole deal was. When Joseph Smith was alive, everybody knew that if he were to die or anything, it would go to his brother Hiram. And if Hiram would die, it would go to his firstborn son. And this is the way everybody knew. So, and if the church didn't know for sure, because both Joseph and Hiram died at once, and there was an interval and they didn't know what to do, Sidney Rigdon was his counselor, was the high council, so was the highest in charge and would have ran the church for any small period of time until Hiram or, his Joseph's firstborn son or something like that got of age. So that was established, and Brigham Young had to falsify many documents and rewrite statements that the church today sees verifying that Brigham Young was right, which has all been fabricated. You can read all these documents and see how it's all been fabricated. Brigham Young is a great huge master of lies. And they falsified these documents. And it's been proven and it's been admitted. But the Mormons today try to ignore all this, because if they finally accept this truth, they realize that Brigham Young was of the devil. And the apostasy came there. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today are an apostate. And they're worse than apostate. I mean, the real apostasy of accepting the Antichrist and willfully sinning and opening up that bottomless pit and being part of it. Now this organization is heavily involved in this great Masonic, the evil takeover, the Illuminati is what we call it, because that's what it was they called themselves. I wouldn't give them the dignity of calling the Masons. They're Illuminati. They were started by individuals that go back to the Old Testament that had this evil priesthood, and they put forth documents such as the Kabbalah, the Sefer Yisroel and the Zohar and stuff. And these were teaching these secret teachings that no one really understood, because no one who didn't know the mysteries or understand these symbols would ever be able to figure out whether they were looking at and interpreting these things correctly, because they were the keepers of the oracle, but they were not keeping them well, and they were lying to the world. And so it took the good people like Joseph Smith who come along and said, look, there's an apostasy going on here. We've got to restore this back to its true principles. And that is why Joseph Smith died in 1844, which is what year they had decided, remember Adventism and William Miller. Joseph Smith talked about William Miller. He said he didn't disagree with a lot of that kind of ideas. But he understood that at that time there was these Masons, like Russell, Charles Taze Russell was a Freemason. And was, they didn't know. That's why he started a Bible student organization. And he was studying the Bible. But the problem is that he was offered money and power and financing, and this corrupted their souls. But once, if there's any doubt as to whether Russell was a good man or anything, I mean, sure, he might have had some good qualities or whatever. Maybe had good intentions to begin with. But what happened is this lust to take over the world, and he started getting power and power and power. And then Judge Rutherford, it's like, I want power. So, so they come in and he's a judge, he's a scoundrel, he's like a John Gotti, of New York. And he takes over the organization in a coup attempt and changes the organization from top to bottom and lies to the people like little peasants and never tells them the truth and uses this as an organization to promote propaganda. And every one of these organizations use fear tactics to keep people in order. If you want a good job, be a CEO of a company, you want a good wife, don't you? That's what Jehovah's Witnesses do. They're not allowed to have many wives, but they are allowed to have as many in succession. So if your woman doesn't do what you like, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, then you can get her disfellowshipped. And then, boom. It won't be long. They'll destroy her spiritually. And they will tell you that, don't worry about it. It won't be about 6 months and she'll be, have done something. You're like worldly that will disfellowship her. And then that means it's not adultery if you divorce her. They grant you a divorce because, she's a pagan now, because she believes in God. not our God, right? So this is how they work. And this is what Brigham Young did. He lied and cheated. And Emma Smith says, at one time, my husband came to me and asked me if I had heard certain rumors about spiritual marriages or anything of the kind, and assured me that if I had, that they were without foundation, that there was no such doctrine and never should be with us knowledge or consent. I know that he had no other wife or wives than myself in any sense, either spiritual or physical. You can read all this. I've got all this information in here. This is Joseph Smith III. He says, it was reported that my dad and mom were quarreling. He says, it's not true. They were always temperate in their language and loving and kind to one another. And these are lies that Emma Smith was some crazy woman. Joseph Smith says, I took dinner in the north room and was remarking to Brother Phelps what a kind, provident wife I had, that when I wanted a little bread and milk, she would load the table with so many good things, and it would destroy my appetite. Joseph Smith was nothing but a gentleman and a kind, decent man who passed the test and refused polygamy and gave his blood to preserve these teachings and truths to mankind. And he gave his testimony that Jesus lives, that he died for your sins and lives now and is coming again. You see, that is how you know a true prophet. So here is some more. You can read this, but we don't have time to read all this information. But I encourage everyone to just pause and read some of this evidence all the way back. It says, oh, what a commingling of thought filled my mind for the moment. Again, she is here. Even in the seventh trouble, undaunted, firm, and unwavering, unchangeable, affectionate Emma Joseph Smith said that in 1842. That was his feelings for his wife. He was always with his wife. His children were always there, and they knew what was going on, and they denied all of this. And the DNA test proves all of this. Emma Smith, according to Brigham Young, is one of the damnedest liars I know of on the earth. Twice she undertook to kill him. See, this man is the one who's the damnable liar. And he did, as Joseph Smith said. Hiram Smith, his brother, said that Joseph Smith said that Brigham Young would lead the church to hell. Emma says, you know, too, that Joseph in my presence told you that you had been teaching such things while he was alive, and that he commanded you in the name of the Lord to teach them no more, or judgments would overtake you. She's speaking to Brigham Young. That's what Emma said up till the day she died. You understand that all the men that were with Joseph Smith never left him. They were the original apostles, and their testimony never changed about Joseph being the prophet. Now you see, that's that coast there of Maine. You see York and Kennebunkport. That's where the Cochranites were, and that's where Brigham Young went and spent time and married one of their women and brought this polygamy, a spiritual wifery, back to Illinois, in Nauvoo, where Joseph Smith was, and tried to get Joseph Smith to go along with it, and he wouldn't do it. And he went and preached against it. There's records, and you could read his orations that he gave talks and said this was wrong, and Joseph Smith was wrong, and it was doing wrong, and anyone who was involved in it would be disciplined by the church. All the way till he died, when they finally killed the man for standing up for the gospels and the principles of truth. They had quite a time carrying out their coup, because everybody had understood that it was written. It was written by Joseph Smith himself that Sidney Rigdon would be in charge if Joseph Smith wasn't there, because he was his first counselor. So what Brigham Young did was he convened a council of the 12, and they decided, because they were all polygamists now, because he had brought them all over and infiltrated. He says, let's disfellowship Sidney Rigdon for apostasy, because he won't accept our authority. So they said that now Sidney Rigdon was a bad guy. So they went to Utah. Well, guess what? None of the original 12 that followed Joseph Smith ever went to Utah with Brigham Young. And they all signed affidavits saying Brigham Young was no good. Emma Smith said Brigham Young was no good. She hated him. She literally hated him because he had killed her husband and tortured her and caused great harm upon the saints, those who love the Lord, and her children. And he stole from her and sullied her reputation. I mean, not sullied, completely disgusting what came out of that man's mouth about that blessed woman. because I do believe Emma Smith was one of the most blessed women that ever lived. And Brigham Young will pay on the day of judgment for what things he's done. And that's none of my business. May God forgive him, and may he be repentant of what he's done. But they had to lie about Emma. They had to threaten her. She talks about being threatened by Brigham Young. And they ended up going in and burning. Brigham Young himself burnt down the church there where Joseph Smith at Nauvoo. They burned it all down. These mobs or whatever, there's no such thing. It was Brigham Young and these bad Masons destroying the evidence. And then they moved to Utah and became polygamists and started retrograding all of this information. They ripped out scriptures in the Doctrine and Covenants where Joseph Smith, just days before this whole thing, as they were killing him, he says, you must not be a polygamist. They have but one wife, and they would go and change the wording. And they got away with that for many years, but all this is coming out. The evidence has always been there, but it's been hard to find. Now we've got computers, we can put all this together. I did research for years when I was a young man, and I lived in Salt Lake, and I went to this big Zion's bookstore, and I got all this information. And I would pour through, and I had all this information about all the lies and stuff that happened with Joseph Smith. Friends, I wish I had time to tell you and record and just talk about all the amazing things that Joseph Smith did. He was such a great, amazing person. I would love to spend one day fishing with Joseph Smith. He was a man of kindness and jovial nature, and very wise and very humble. And there was never any record of Joseph Smith ever doing anything that I would find wrong or embarrassing or anything. But there have been all kinds of accusations, and all of them have been proven to have been lied, forgeries. They claim that there were affidavits signed, 30 years later with these women saying, oh, yeah, I was his wife. But they were being paid a lot of money, and they were already Brigham Young's wife. And they were told that if they would carry on this, they would get a stipend. And, otherwise they were like 70 years old at this point, right? And they were like, well, we're going to cut you off and you'll die. And there's affidavits of women saying that they were being forced to lie for Brigham Young, or else they were going to not let them have food, and they would throw them out in the cold. It's all lies. Joseph Smith was not for polygamy. He died to try and restore the ancient truth. Now, what does that say? That he failed? No. It shows you that the apostasy had come. Remember what we were waiting for? The apostasy must come first before the man of sin be revealed. The man of sin is coming up out of the bottom's pit that Aleister Crowley tried to bring up out of the pit and embody the beast. This organization, Hollywood, the world that you have. We will talk more about this and find out what the goal of Satan was. He told John Dee and Edward Kelly his goals. And he's carrying them all out right now. You'll be very surprised to know. Anyway, we're over an hour. I'm going to go ahead and go. And I think we'll probably do more on Joseph Smith because I really just rambled on and I didn't have a chance to read some of these documents. Maybe I'll put these together and show you the facts in a little bit better and methodical way. And we'll prove step by step, because there's stuff that you need to know about Brigham Young, what he did. So we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Have a good one.